Hello everyone and good evening and welcome to our AGM. The business of the AGM is fourfold. Luke, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. We're here to consider the accounts, to re-elect trustees, to consider the appointment of Tudor John as specialist charity auditors and accountants, to take on the role of independent examiners for the charity, and to decide whether their pay is acceptable. I'm your chair, Sanjay Sethi, and I'm joined to present the AGM today by our Vice Chair, Martin Short, who continues to provide his invaluable advice to the charity, but will be stepping down as Vice Chair, but thankfully remaining as a trustee. We thank Martin for his continued service. Martin will take us through item 2 on the agenda. I'm also joined by Rajan Kula, a new face for the charity, who's stepping in Rob's shoes as treasurer. Rajan will be taking us through the majority of the agenda as it relates to the accounts of the charity. Rob has decided to step down as treasurer and trustee and will be missed by us all. Rajan has been a friend of mine for over 40 years, and we're very thankful as he was able to step into Rob's shoes. Lastly, Louise, our longtime CEO, is joining us to take us through some key milestones for 2020. To say managing a small charity like ours through COVID is an understatement, and we're truly grateful to have such a dedicated team. Luke, could we go to the next slide? So without further ado, let's start with Louise.
Hi everybody, it's really lovely to talk to you all this evening. So I've been given the task of talking about what we delivered for the TSC community in 2020 before Rajan explains how we paid for it all. Obviously it was an incredibly difficult year for the charity. We started the year with a business plan, and in March we had to revise that business plan with the support of trustees to look at what we should deliver in the unprecedented face of a global pandemic. So these were the objectives that we agreed with the trustees for 2020 to support the community as best we could through an incredibly challenging year, and also ensure the survival of the charity for the longer term. Now, those of you who were at the AGM last year will remember that we had plans to launch a new TSA support line in January 2020, and that really was incredibly timely, because it meant as things began to close down, as we could no longer see people face to face or meet people face to face at meetings, we could use our new support line. And through an incredibly challenging year, that support line answered 384 calls and emails from people who wanted information, or sometimes just needed a listening ear during an incredibly tough and stressful period. So we launched the support line, and we spoke to and listened to many of the TSC community during a difficult year. We shared information about coronavirus and TSC. We worked closely with the clinicians in the different NHS TSC clinics to make sure we understood what people's risks were if they had TSC and caught coronavirus as well. And we did our very best to help everyone understand how to stay safe and keep well during the pandemic. And we know that that information was really valued by people, by just how many people logged on and used it during 2020. We moved very quickly from face-to-face events to virtual events like today's to bring people together at least once a month, so that no one felt alone while they were self-isolating and shielding. And we all spent a huge amount of time at home last year. And I hope that those of you who are able to join us for virtual events found it helpful to just reach out and speak to and see other people, albeit through our computer screens. We postponed the planned 2020 International Research Conference to 2021. And we hosted a virtual, I should say 2020 International Research Symposium, again, bringing together researchers from around the globe to make sure that people still came together in spite of coronavirus, and that we could keep the research agenda moving during 2020. We continue to invest in our existing research projects. Some of those were slowed down a little by the fact that researchers couldn't get into labs during the periods that we were all having to stay at home, but all projects have carried on and they will all complete in the next couple of years, albeit some of them slightly later than planned. And we also continue to seek new research partnerships to give the TSC community hope for the future. And that was an incredibly important part of our year last year, not just kind of do things for the here and now, but also to keep that eye on the future and making sure we would keep moving forward. And then finally, we ensured the survival of the charity by taking proactive steps to manage our finances during an incredibly difficult year. And as we'll talk about shortly, sadly, that did mean difficult steps such as asking senior staff to reduce their hours and pay during 2020 to help the charity survive, furloughing over half of our staff. Furloughing people and asking others to take on their roles during that period to ensure the survival of the charity. And eventually making the decision to make some posts redundant again to ensure that the charity could get through the year and move into 2021. So that's what we delivered during 2020, and I am happy to take questions about it, and then to hand over to Raj to talk about the money.
Luke, do we have any questions, or can we move on to Rajan?
I can't see any questions right now. If anyone does have any, please feel free to write them in the chat box. Maybe we should give it 30 seconds or so just to see. No, it doesn't look like there's any just now.
Great. Well, Rajan, over to you.
Hi all, I'm Raj, I'm your new treasurer. By way of an introduction, first of all, I'd like to echo Sanjo's thoughts about Rob. He's done a sterling job, and on behalf of the trustees, I'd like to thank him for everything he's done. Anyway, a little bit about me before I get into the numbers. I had a variety of financial management positions in a variety of leading consumer businesses. Throughout my career, I've prided myself on having transparency in numbers and explaining things in a straightforward way, and I'd like to continue that. So if I get into the numbers, 2020 was the first full year of the TSA strategy, which included the journey to financial self-sufficiency. We need to balance our books to aim that we've got a sustainable future. 2020 was also a year like no other, as the coronavirus changed life as we know it. Despite the disruption, the TSA was able to deliver a creditable performance. While our fundraising income increased year on year, it reduced in some areas due to events like the London Marathon Great North Run falling. However, the team worked really hard to offset this with income from other areas. We'd like to thank the TSA community for their fantastic response to the coronavirus emergency pill, which raised almost £22,000 for the charity. We'd also like to thank the staff again for both being for those who are furloughed and those who took on reduced hours. Furlough income meant that we were able to bring in another £51,000 to cover our costs through the government scheme. We were able to reduce our costs by 386,000. Louise talked earlier about staff redundancies in 2019 and 20, and we've reduced our headcount. We've also worked hard to reduce costs in other areas of the business. We had losses on investments which were driven by the prudent decision to hold cash in uncertain market, i.e. we converted shares. All of that means that we carry forward 972,000 through to future use. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of how we've spent our money overall. And you can see we've spent 2% of our income, or 2 pence per pound, on governance. We spend 17p per pound on fundraising. But as you see, the vast majority of this goes on supporting and communication to the community, as well as research. Next slide, please. So I talked earlier about the value of our balance sheet, which reduced by 308,000. Just to give you a little bit more detail, we converted shares to cash because we are in its uncertain times, and we wanted to ensure that we were able to fund future research commitments. We expect to add designated funds to reduce to around 300,000 by the end of 2022, which is next year. We aim to continue to invest 11 research commitments, funding medicines and understanding accessibility to people for mental health for children and young people and staff. We're looking to work with new research partnership strategies focusing on larger funders, which includes the Tandem project. Next slide, please. So overall, I want to talk now about our 5-year summary, and it's always useful to know where we're coming from and to explain the reason where we're going. So you can see the red line shows that over the last 5 years, we've sustained a number of operating deficits or losses, and that's something that can't continue if we want the charity to continue to provide support in the future. And you'll see that amazing performance we've done and reduces those losses from just under 500,000 in 2019 to 48,000 in loss in 2020. We're on track to deliver a performance that is at least as good, hopefully better than that in the current year. I deliberately have not updated this with a number because we still work in very uncertain times and our figures have not been audited. Are there any questions?
Just seeing if there's any questions now. Raj, it doesn't look like there are any, but we'll give it a minute so just to see. Looks like there's no questions, but if any do come in, we'll keep an eye out.
Perfect. I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Rajan, for your summary. Suffice to say that this year and last has been tremendously tough on the charity. As Rajan's mentioned, in the year that this AGM is concerned with, we've seen a reduction in staff from 18 to 10 people. But sadly, we are due to lose a couple more, and that leaves a hardcore team down to 8 people. We are very confident that the 8 people within the charity that remain is a right size for this charity going forward, and that our aim is to continue to bring in reoccurring income between £350,000 and £400,000 to sustain both our commitments to supporting the community and also for research. We're now up to the first vote, and the first vote is now on screen, which is to consider and to, if thought fit, adopt the accounts of the association. Luke, can you bring up the poll?
Hopefully everyone can see that now. We'll keep this up just for 30 seconds or so. Okay, another few seconds. Great, I think we can say that's closed there.
Right.
Okay, I think it's my turn now.
I was going to introduce you, but Martin, you're an old hand. Take it away.
Well, as you know, all trustees are volunteers, and we currently have 11 of them, with the retirement after long and distinguished service from Rob Vaughan, who I think joined the board at almost the same time as I did. And he's been a brilliant person to have alongside us on the journey. And of course, his firm Ashmole down there in Swansea in South Wales continue to undergird the financial management of the charity. And he now will be in a slightly more comfortable position of not on occasions having to wear two hats. So we're still going to be very much in touch with Rob. And of course, he'll still very much be cheering us on from the sidelines. All of the trustees have connections with the TSA community and with people who are living with TSC. We are a band of brothers and sisters who travel together in the journey we all face. Every year, we re-elect around a third of the team. What we're trying to do is keep a good measure of continuity by retaining at least 2/3 of the team each year. As trustees come up for re-election, there's a process which enables them to reflect on what they're bringing to the charity and where they think the charity's governance might be strengthened. And they also have the opportunity to indicate whether they wish to continue to serve or whether they feel it's time for them to stand down. So no trustee in the organisation is committed to being part of us for anything more than a 3-year period. Of course, many people have been trustees for far longer than that, but if you do become a trustee, there is the opportunity to elegantly leave when you choose to do so. The former chairs of the TSA who are still trustees, that's Tom Carter, Chris Kingswood, and myself, along with the current chair, Sanjay, try and keep 2 important areas on track. One, that we have a diverse board with a good mix of skills and expertise. And secondly, that we have appropriate people in the pipeline to whom we can look to take on the various officer roles and have a good succession plan. In the past, I've managed this process as chair and have continued to do this now as I help Sanjay. Next year, as I retire from being an officer of the charity, this role will pass to my successor in the fullness of time. The TSA is always looking to strengthen the board. And if you feel you'd have something to offer as a trustee, then do have a chat with any board member or with Louise, and we can tell you more about what is involved. But for now, it's my pleasure to ask you to re-elect, if you think fit, Chris Kingswood and Lisa Suchet. And in between my invitations to re-elect Chris Kingswood and Lisa, Sanjay is going to invite you to re-elect me if you think fit. So, Luke, tell us how this works first for Chris Kingswood.
Yeah, no problem. So the vote for Chris, you should see that now. And whilst people are voting for this, I'll just say, Marie, we've seen your question. I suggest that we answer it once we've done the voting, just to keep things clear. But we will get to it. Okay, give it one more second. Okay, thank you, everyone. I will share this. I think that's definitive.
Thank you, Luke. And now on to the re-election of Martin Short.
Just give it one more second. Okay, thank you, everyone. It's a clear yes again.
And finally, the re-election of Lisa Suchet.
do it one more second. Great, thank you all. Definitive again.
Thank you. I'd like to say that the first resolution has been passed, and also the second resolution has been passed on the re-elections. I'd also like to note that the votes that are not included are the panelists' votes. We don't vote, but I think as a matter of course, we are members and entitled to vote, and we would all be voting in the yes category, and therefore we can say that they've been unanimously passed. Right, and now on to our final vote. Luke, could you bring that up? Great, thanks. So as part of our cost-cutting exercise, actually, Luke, do you want to do the questions before we move on to this resolution?
Yes, I think that's
right.
That's fine. So I will read out Marie's question. If anyone does have any more questions, please do feel free to answer them. And you know what, I'm going to put my video on because it does feel a little bit strange not to have it on. I do think it would be better not to have it on. But, so the question from Marie is, when will you be able to share with TSA members the staff posts that will still be in place, please? I'll leave that to yourselves.
Yeah, Louise, I think, was offering to answer that.
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. So I think people will know the posts that are still in place at the moment, but I'll just quickly run you through the 2 posts we've lost, and then I will just update you on who's left. So we reduced to 10 staff in 2020, which is the period that the accounts are covering. So that was my post as chief executive, and during 2020 I job shared for a big chunk of the year with Samantha Barber, who did an amazing job and would have been at last year's AGM of working alongside me while I reduced my hours because I've got very young children. For those of you who don't know, so homeschooling alongside working full-time as chief executive is quite tough. So one of the posts that we don't have now is the job share. So I've gone back to working full-time now that things have settled down a bit. And Samantha Barber has moved on. She has a full-time role at Gene People as chief exec. It's a specialist charity supporting all kinds of people with rare conditions. So it's great to have Samantha there. So one of the posts that we lost was the joint chief executive when I went back to full-time. The second post that we have very sadly lost this year is our office manager, Mike Dodson. So you will see when I talk a little bit about 2021 that we've taken the decision in 2021 to close the TSA office to make additional cost savings. And sadly, because we closed the office, we no longer needed an office manager post. And so the decision was sadly made to make that post redundant. So those are the 2 posts that we don't have in taking the charity down to 8 staff. So the 8 staff who you will all know, I think, very well, are myself as chief executive, Luke as head of support services and communications, Luke's amazing team, Anna Gaunt, who heads up the support line, and her colleague Rachel Harding, who some of you will have come into contact with already. Rachel joined us this year. Alongside them, we have head of income generation, Michaela Conlin-Hulme, who has been doing an absolutely amazing job of keeping the income coming in despite it being such a tough year. Supported by fundraising manager, which at present is Catherine Warden, who was formerly known as Catherine Harrison. So many of you will know Catherine, who's been with us for a number of years. And alongside them, the 2 remaining staff are our head of research, Dr. Pooja Takhar, and our research officer, Bethan Vaughan. So that core staff of 8 people remains and continues to work incredibly hard for the charity.
Luke, any other questions?
There's no questions right now, Sanjay. So I think we're okay to keep going.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to our final vote. You can see that the vote well, the content of the vote on screen. Essentially, as Louise highlighted, we went through a cost-cutting exercise in an effort to right-size the charity. That wasn't just losing people, that was actually looking at every aspect of the charity where we thought we could cut costs. One of those was retendering third-party services. As part of retendering third-party services, one of those third-party services was our accountant and auditing provider. We went through a formal tender process and asked for a range of accounting firms to bid for those services. Tudor John came back with the most competitive package, and after being interviewed by a number of trustees, including Rajan as the new treasurer, it was determined that they were the best of the bunch, if you like. So this resolution is to appoint them as our new independent examiners. Now, independent examination is a little bit different from audit. It's a lighter touch audit, if you like, and it's something that's completely permitted by the rules and regulations that govern charities, and in particular small charities like ours. Because it's lighter touch, it's much cheaper, and that's what we're looking for right now, is to cut costs, but not necessarily cut the good governance of the charity. So whilst we're having a vote today to appoint Tudor John as the independent examiner for the charity, to look at the accounts for 2020 and to look at their pay for doing so, nothing stops the trustees from deciding that they can reverse the decision to have an independent examination going forward and audit the charity, particularly if the trustees feel we need additional comfort around particular issues, controls, or financial aspects of the running of the charity. Right now, where we are today, we feel that independent examination is the right way forward, particularly as we are in this cost-saving mode. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Luke to put the vote up, both to appoint Tudor John and to authorise their pay.
Yeah, no problem. So you should see the first vote now. Thank you. Just give it another second. Great, I think that's everyone. Yeah. So the results are there. And then the final question is now up. Yeah, give it one more second. Yeah, great. Okay, thank you all. Yeah, and that's clear also.
Right. So those resolutions are carried and have been passed unanimously as well. For the next order of business, we're going to reflect a little bit on 2021. It's not quite over, but a lot of work's been done, and we would normally do that as part of the big day. But obviously the International Research Conference somewhat substituted that then, particularly because COVID was happening too. It was unlikely that a big day was going to be well received. So Louise is going to take us through what we delivered in 2021. And then after that, Martin will take us through a question that we received at last year's AGM to do with the balance of us providing support to our community and to research, and whether that balance should be re-examined. So I'm going to leave the next sections to Louise and Martin.
Thank you, Sanjay. And yeah, we're very conscious that it's November, so we're quite a long way through 2021. So we wanted to make sure there was a chance on the agenda just to talk people through what we've been doing this year and to give you an opportunity to ask questions if you'd like to do so. So what have we been doing this year? Well, we've continued to embed the new support line. And we've introduced in particular 2 new services to it. One is language line, so that if someone has English as a second language and perhaps isn't as confident in speaking to the advisors in English, they can access an interpreter to speak to them alongside our advisors and make sure that the advice they're getting, which is really hard, particularly when it's technical, sort of clinical advice that they're asking about, using medical language, just to make sure that everyone can understand the information that we share through the support line, and get the emotional support that's offered as well. So that language line service is now embedded and available for people whenever they need it. We've also introduced web chat, which means that people can type their questions and get typed responses. And in particular, we're hoping that will drive better access for family carers, where people are perhaps caring for someone who doesn't like them using the phone or doesn't like them talking to other people. And also for young people with TSC are often more comfortable with online communications. So we've only introduced that very recently, but we've already had, I think, nine web chats over the past month or so. So it's clearly something that people are looking to use, and hopefully we will build on that over time. So that's a support line, again, just trying to make it as accessible as possible to everybody who wants to use it. We've continued to bring people together for regular virtual events to make sure no one feels alone with TSC throughout 2021. And we're already planning ahead for our events programme of a mix of face-to-face and virtual for 2022. So those events are proving popular, both in terms of people attending them, but even more so for people watching afterwards. And I think because many of our community have caring commitments, people watch at really odd hours, but that's great as long as people are accessing the information that we have. So we'll sometimes have sessions for 15 or 20 people that are watched afterwards by 300 over the course of a couple of months. That's fantastic, and it means we're reaching as many people as possible. The high point in many ways of the past year has been hosting the virtual 2021 International TSC Research Conference, where we brought together around 250 researchers from around the globe and clinicians to share best practice, to share the most recent research, and to help us drive forward the research agenda. So that was fantastic. And we actually hosted an online hub in the end to share the research with the wider community. We didn't get many people signing up to attend a planned event, but we have quite a lot of people logging onto the hub to look at the research and to watch lay summaries of the information that was shared at the conference itself. So that's been a really exciting part of the year. We've done a lot of work this year with pharmaceutical companies. There are a number of companies developing new treatments for TSC-related epilepsy and for facial angiofibromas. And we've been working with the companies themselves to help them carry out research to understand the impact of TSC-related epilepsy and facial angiofibromas on people's quality of life. And we've also started to work over the past couple of months with the regulators. So that's the Scottish Medicines Consortium in Scotland, the All Wales Medicines Strategy Group in Wales, and imminently with the National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence in England. As these treatments are being licensed, they are then being considered for whether they should be funded free of charge on the NHS. So we're working with the pharma companies on a newly licensed treatment for TSC-related epilepsy at the moment, Epidiolex, and we are expecting a topical sirolimus cream for facial angiofibromas to be licensed in 2020. And we know that the regulator are already starting to gear up to look at that product next year as well. So it's great to see some new treatments coming on board for people. We've started work on an income generating training officer for social workers, residential care workers and teachers to improve their understanding of TSC. We know that it's fantastic for people to see a TSC specialist in one of the clinics, but that might be once a year. whereas social workers, residential care workers and teachers are supporting people every day. So we want to make sure that the people that you come into contact with most are able to understand TSC and provide fantastic support. That project's been delayed a tiny bit. With a really small team, if someone leaves, then that slightly slows us down while we train someone else. So sadly, Mega Arumagam, who many of you will know, was part of our support line when it first launched, moved on to a new role mid-year. And so we slowed the project down a little bit while we recruited and trained her replacement to understand TSC well, Rachel, who's joined us recently. But we're now back on track with this project, and we will be getting these training officers ready for launch next year, which is brilliant. And then finally, we've continued to improve our finance management, working with our new providers, Tudor John. And we are continuing to use digital technology and take an enterprising approach to income generation to both diversify our income and improve the quality of our services. So that work has continued throughout the year, and hopefully you can see improvements in innovations we're making, like sharing more information on our social media channels and improving the quality of them, because we know people come to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn to find out about us. Yes, so you'll see that work continuing. I've already touched on this in response to the question we were asked, but we've also closed the TSA office and sadly made the role of office manager redundant. And I'd like to thank Mike, who worked incredibly hard with us for a number of years for all his fantastic support for the charity, and he's sadly missed. That takes our core level of staffing to 8 people, which we think is a sustainable size for our charity. We have, as you will have seen from Raj's fantastic slide earlier, we've got a historic proven ability to raise about £400,000 to £450,000 of income each year. And so we're basing the size of the charity now on what we know we can raise, instead of the hope that we will raise more and projecting future growth. So we're at a size now where we know we can raise that much every year. We know with that we can have 8 staff, we can invest a little bit in research, and we can run our support services. And that means that we feel we're sustainable in the current term. So that's what we've been delivering in 2021. And I'm very happy to take any questions on that either now or at the end of the meeting.
Okay, do fire questions in on that slide if you'd like to do so, and we'll move on to the next one, which is all to do with last year's questions to the panel. Every AGM members have a chance to ask trustees any questions they like. And last year, the board was asked to think again about the balance of the charity's spending between support and research. This has been a recurring issue for the board in my years as an officer. We've addressed it over the years with different outlooks and different outcomes, depending on our reading of resources available at the time and how best to balance our twin aims of help for today and hope for tomorrow. And as you'll see from this slide, the question asked last year has been explored by the board in quite a lengthy conversation. And the consensus of the board is that doing research and supporting research continues to be important to the TSA. And that the board currently feels that we must continue to look hard at the charity to ensure that it is fit for the future. And you've heard quite a bit about that this evening. That we've turned our support services around ahead of the pandemic with a model that is fit for purpose. Although we hadn't seen the pandemic coming, we've ended up with a model that has worked well through the pandemic. And the new support line has meant that we've been able to provide support remotely through a difficult time. And as you also heard, we're developing a new model of research that is more fit for purpose, with a focus on working in partnership so that we bring our particular expertise, and we have the expertise on the board among our clinicians and among our advisors, and we're able to share that expertise with those looking to do research in our area and we can provide some C-Chord funding, which encourages larger partners to engage in research projects because they feel they're well supported, well directed, and well backed. That's the model that we're looking to develop for the future, if you like, to get even more bang from our buck. Rest assured that we will continue to address this question and make sure that we're getting the balance right on funding for support services and funding for research in future, and that over time the question may find itself being resolved in slightly different directions with slightly different proportions and priorities. This is a question that will always be at the forefront of the board's consideration, and we'll always welcome your insights and questions, which will help us to get this balance right.
Thank you, Martin. Are there any other questions, Luke?
No questions as of yet. We can maybe give it 30 seconds or so just to see if any come in. No, it doesn't look like we're getting any right now, but I'll keep an eye out.
Okay, great. So we're ending today with a campaign, which is leveraged, if you like, by the Big Give, which is another charity that effectively offers twice the impact for any donation made within a specific period. So we would really like to encourage you all to make a donation during this period, because it will get doubled, which is fantastic. You'll note that in the past we benefited from a larger designated fund, and as Rajan has pointed out, through all the structuring processes that we've been through and through the deployment into research, we've seen those funds decline, and we expect them to sit at around £300,000 next year, when we will be a right-sized charity. However, because we're now seeing those funds dwindle, now more than ever do we need your support. So, please disseminate this amongst your friends and family, and hopefully we're able to bring in some welcome donations prior to Christmas. So then on the last slide, Luke, I think finally we'd like to say thank you. I guess the most important thank yous are to the staff of the TSA. As Louise said, it's been tough, and we all acknowledge how tough it's been. And they've taken really amazing decisions on behalf of this charity to, volunteer themselves in some cases for furlough, so as to encourage, the charity's survival. And, for those who were furloughed, it's been tough. And I think for those who remained in post, it's also been tough, because they've been asked to take on more and more responsibility. So, we definitely would like to take this moment to thank the staff. Obviously, donations are critical. So the donations that have come in from both our corporate sponsors and our individuals have been amazing, as to have the money coming in from grants and foundations. So, there are a lot of thank yous there. They're very heartfelt, and, they mean a lot to not just the trustees who are giving their time freely, but hopefully also, the community really appreciates that too. So without further ado, I draw the AGM to a close.